saw this, and then I saw this, and I saw that you can't get Janua, Brigida, or Wukong. They're limiting it to only. They're not letting you go back to the past 6 months. Janua was almost 6 months ago to the day, and the same with the artifacts. So we got to make this list over again real quick. So we're going to clean this up a little bit, guys. I know the last time I went over a lot of units, gave a lot of options, talked about where they're going to be useful. I basically made a tier list like it was a tier list, like we're just discussing how good the units are. And having talked to Valky last night, he really opened my eyes to this. This is about a selector. And new players are getting 9 units to select from. Returners, I think, are getting 6 or 7, right? But I want to focus this on, these are units you should use a selector on if you don't have it. These are units you should have on your account, and these are units you shouldn't use selectors on. So that's kind of how we're going to break this down. This column's going to be, make sure you have this unit on your account somewhere. They're so important that they're not just worth, but it's almost an imperative to use your selector on it. And then if you have all of these units, you can start picking from this column based on your needs, based on your wants, based on your desires, the teams you're trying to build, the units you like. And then this bottom column is just, people are going to freak out about this column and say, but those units are really good for me. They may be really good, but I just don't think they're worth using a selector on, right? And then cannot obtain, that's going to be all of these collaboration, limited, and there are some special in-game units that you can't obtain too. Okay, so that's all of the limited units that you cannot obtain. No limiteds, no collabs. They are also locking us out from selecting Yuna, which is good. Nobody should select Yuna. You get her for free in the game anyway. Xeno, they're locking out. You can also get him for free because you can go into the Holotrial shop after getting enough currency and buy him there if you should want him. Better things to do with that currency. And they're going back 6 months and saying you can't get any of the new units in the past 6 months. That means no Immortal Wukong, so suddenly doing Rift for new players is a lot harder. No Brigida, which is not that big of a deal because she's not that great of a unit. And then Janua, who was probably my #1 pick for people starting RTA, and he is shut out now, so it kind of sucks that you cannot get these units. But, you know, we're going to move on. You can't get them, you can't get them. Now, these are the units you should not use a selector on. And don't get shocked from some of these, because some of these are insanely good units. And the reason you're not going to use a selector on them is, well, Brig, you will get for free doing the Adventurous Path. Tamarin, free from the Connection Heroes. Sirmia, Vivian, and Sigrid, Premier Hunt and Expedition units, you get them for free by doing the Hunt Challenge events. Bomb Model Kana, nice and Expeditions, fun unit, you get her for free doing the connections. So definitely, please, for the love of God, don't use a selector on units you can get in-game for free. These units, I don't think you should use a selector on just because they're garbage tier. Lilibet, arguably the worst unit in the game, followed by Melissa, who, after her nerf is been removed from the game and nearly impossible to use. Ilanov is very difficult to use and just a unit you're not going to find much use in, or in PvE or PvP. Chloe has a unique gimmick that lets her do a couple of things in some hunts. You'll eventually move past that and use other units. Ray is outpaced by a 3-star green unit called Bernard, so why would you get this unit? Charles is good for clearing some early content, but there are just better options, better free options. Basar is in the has-beens category. Once upon a time, he was one of the most damaging, dangerous units in the game, and he has fallen off greatly. Kane is a has-been. He was used in the old Rift, and when that comes around again in like maybe a year, maybe he'll be good again. Tywin can be used quite well, but he takes some know-how. He's a complex and difficult unit to use. He's basically PvP only, and by the time you're interested in a kit like Tywin's, you're not looking at tier lists anymore. Says takes really great gear to make him do his job passably. Leica is another has-been, never was unit. She is a solid opener, and you'll need insane gear. to get her to work the way you want her to work. Sharoon was a solid unit. She had her 15 minutes of fame, but units like DDR have just surpassed her. Yulha was a powerhouse unit before injury made her pretty much irrelevant. Ludwig is a really nice cleave unit in a world where there are much nicer cleave units. Hua Young was the terror of Epic 7 and one of the most dangerous units in the game. She's since been nerfed to the point where it takes insane gear to make her work. And Arunka also takes relatively high-end gear just to make her work, and neither of them really work quite well enough to use in any measurable way unless you have such high-end gear you're not bothering to look at tier lists. The Fire Coeric, Earth Coeric, and Ice Coeric, because they're all pretty much the same unit, take really, 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 really high-end gear, and even then you're probably still not going to reach for them that much. The Great Mortelix is kind of underrated in PvP, but he does take very high-end gear to use, and those uses are still very niche. Teiyu has a pretty decent kit for countering some of the problems that we have in the arena world, but I just don't think he's a strong enough hero to recommend. Aramentha can be very, very strong in high-end RTA, but she takes very good gear to build, so I can't endorse her for a selector. Same with Fumir. She can be really good in a lot of situationally unique spots in RTA, especially with third pick band protection. Can't recommend her for use on a selector. Yufine, I was initially recommending her because Yufine does have some PvE uses, right? She's really great in Labyrinth. She can be used in Banshee, but here's the thing with Yufine in Labyrinth. She only works if she has her exclusive equipment. If you don't have her exclusive equipment, you can't use her in the Labyrinth, and people aren't going to be starting out with any ancient coins, or with any fate gazes to buy those things. So you'll have to actually farm for probably months to get the point to where you can use your Yufine in PvE. So I can't recommend her for a selector at this time. Ervalin is a good Banshee 13 unit, and that's about it. Balin Sazan is a good Earth Expedition unit, and that's it. Fire Cecilia is a good Earth Expedition and maybe some Arena, and that's it. Mui has situational PvE uses that come and go maybe once or twice a year. Rest of the time she sits on the bench. Same can be said for Fire Lidica. She has some situational uses that pop up once or twice a year or on 1 or 2 floors of Abyss, and then you never use her. Abigail is getting a buff. She is actually, gives her some really nice niche uses in Guild Wars, and it might bring her back into RTA. We'll have to see. I'm hesitant to recommend a unit who is untested from a new buff, so I'm not going to recommend her for a selector. Elvira lets you hard stop some problem units like Yufine and Landy, but that's some pretty high-end stuff. You've got to understand how this unit works and weave her into your team. Definitely not worth a selector. Eligos takes crazy good gear to be really, really good, and for that reason alone, I can't recommend use a selector on this guy. Kairon is a really nice anti-cleave unit. If you are tired of getting cleaved, he can help, but we're in a world where a lot of things are stopping what Kairon does, so I just can't recommend. Who used to be such a good PvE unit is now just for niche use in RTA. Charlotte, we're getting close to talking about putting units up here, right? Charlotte, with all of her attacks on her S1 being AoE if she's got a buff, lets her clear a lot of content, but there are just better options. There's free options. Being able to always crit is nice. It lowers her gear requirement, but we've got a lot of other higher end units that do that trick too. When you're ready to break into PvP, you'll probably have those units. Fire Lilius does have some really nice PvE uses. She's good in adventure, she dual attacks, she cleanses. She's on the cusp of being up here, but with what her kit does, I'm just not quite ready to recommend her as a unit to pick up. Yeah, I just can't. I'm sorry. Senya is a solid starter unit for Guild Wars and for early arena, but she requires a specific artifact that without it, she's less of a unit. She takes pretty decent gear. For those reasons, I'm not going to recommend her. Don't worry, I know we're running out of units. We're going to seed this list, trust. Crow is a decent knight, but he falls off really fast, and he falls off to a lot of 3 and 4 star units that you're probably going to pick up just by doing your daily summons during this event. Violet just needs a buff. He is really good into ice teams and to certain niche uses, but right now, not so much. And Alencia. Alencia could go here. Alencia, if there was a line I could put right between, I'd put her right, because right now, Alencia is here. And if her buffs turn out the way we think they're going to turn out, she could be a powerhouse Guild War, Arena, and RTA unit. So I'm gonna wait and see. And the last thing I want to do is recommend a unit and be very, very wrong and have her not be as good as I think she's going to be. So I'm putting her near the top of my please don't use a selector on these units list. Enough about this, right? Enough about units you shouldn't pick. Let's talk about units you should pick. I think the most important unit to start out with is Fire Ravi. I know, it's a departure from what I said before, but what I said before, I was focusing on just PvE. Fire Ravi has early PvE potential. She will help you clear a lot of content. She is very hard to kill. She self-heals. She stuns. And once you get out of PvE and you start breaking into PvP, she is a powerhouse unit in RTA. She's good in Guild Wars. This is the evergreen unit that you'll be using from day 1 through day 501. I know, somewhere Red is screaming into the void for his distaste for Fire Ravi. Number 2 on my list is Roana. This is going to let you accomplish a lot of PvE needs so easily. She heals your entire team on counters, and on extra attacks. She CR pushes, she gives barriers, she gives a resurrection buff, so if your units die, they can come back to life. You do have to time it a little bit since it is a buff, but what a great unit for people who are trying to climb through Abyss, people who are trying to deal with Labyrinth, and people who are breaking into early level Arena, Guild Wars, and RTA. Iseria, I'm putting up here because she does something unique that no other unit does. She resets skills entirely. You can use her to reset Tamarin and have Tamarin be ready to go right out of the box. You can use her to reset Dark Corvus if you get that unit, and he can S3. She also has got a defense break, she's got a strip, she's got a buff block, she's got a defense break on her S1, and being a ranger, she can wear a solid gambit of artifacts that also help boost your team. Destina is a safety net. She is one of the only units that heals on all 3 of her skills. She CR pushes, she cleanses, she resurrects units from the dead. When you're just starting out, she can save your butt on stages where you just can't quite complete. Your entire team is getting killed off. And when you get into early RTA, she is a very useful unit to have to keep your team going in some of those lower level RTA fights. Aria I'm putting up here because, as surprising as it is, she is a very low gear requirement hero for PvE. She's got the lowest gear requirement for a Wyvern 13 one-shot, and that's important. Especially now that we can't get Wukong and we're locked out of Rift for new players. Aria is going to be the keys to the city to getting you into a fast, stable Wyvern 13 run. She also lets you auto a lot of Abyss floors. She'll be good into Guild Wars once you start building some better gear on her, and once you start building some great gear on her, you could possibly even take her into Arena and RTA. She, like Ravi, is an evergreen unit. And like Ravi, she has some minor PvP uses at the start and some decent PvP uses at the end. Ravi's only ahead of her because Ravi's PvP uses are insane at a higher level, whereas Aria's are more niche. So it's like this, right? New players are getting 9 selectors. Now, returners, I think, are only getting like 4 or 6, but since we get 9 selectors, I want to have 9 options up top. So I'm going to start loading a couple of PvP units in here, right? Green Celine is an extremely high damage dealing unit with a lot of self-preservation capabilities, although I don't think she's as important as these first 5. she is still really, really strong in Guild Wars, in Arena, and in RTA, and you might even find some uses for her in some higher end PvP or PvE where the enemy does a lot of non-attack skills. Fire Politis stops people from CR pushing, and in a world full of CR pushers, which is early RTA, you will find this unit is really, really good in preventing people from just cleaving the hell out of you. She can be multiple different ways. She's so good that I'm actually keen on having 2 of her on my account. So I think she's a worthwhile pickup after you get these first 5 knocked out. She is definitely one that I consider getting. This unit takes really, really good gear to really use effectively in high-end RTA, but in lower-end RTA, she doesn't take that good of a gear. You can build her with effect resistance, or you can build her with speed, and she is just the strongest, most debilitating RTA unit in the game right now, bar none. She's a unit that, if anything, you pick her up and you stick her in your storage and you keep for later, for when you're ready to dive into RTA. And Elena is going to be my 10th unit. That's 10, right? Or 9th unit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9. Elena has got some PvE and PvP uses. She can really be great on arena defense. She can really be good on RTA offense. She can be used in a lot of PvE content like Abyss and Labyrinth. A solid pickup unit. Now, if you don't have any of these 9 units, or sorry, if you have all 9 of these units, I mean, you got these tools in your account, on your toolbox, at that point in time, you can kind of pick what slots into your team. What style of combat do you want to play? What floors are you struggling with and you need a unit to get past? What tools do you need in your toolbox? To that end, I'm going to put tools for your toolbox. We've got Luluca and Tenebria. These units solve problems, right? They do let you overcome some difficulties when you don't have better answers for them. Be hesitant on getting these. You will not use these units later in the game. Another solid option is Fire Ken. Fire Ken has got a dual attack into a defense break, and it can be a guaranteed defense break, and that really can be useful for solving problems, for building specific Wyvern teams, for overcoming some floors. We've got Beehoo, who is one of the more underrated RTA units. In Guild Wars, he can just straight up win you fights in Guild Wars. And people right around that 6 to 9 month mark, they're starting to try to think of ways to deal with Guild Wars a little bit better. His buff blocks, his burns, him being a sub DPS, I think you will be impressed with what Beehoo brings to the team. Green Bellona saved my life in this game. I was ready to quit, and then I pulled Green Bellona, and suddenly I could do things. Her S1 does damage based on the target's health, not her own, the target's health. And when you're in PvE and you're fighting things that have hundreds of thousands of health, it lets her do crazy damage. She's also got an AoE defense break on her S3. Very few units have that. She spams lots of extra attacks. She will help you clear so much PvE content early on. Now, when you get to the late game, much like Tenebria and Luluca, when you get to the late game, you're not going to reach for her very much at all. So when you're considering, like, you're to the point where you're trying to climb into RTA, I'd maybe slide her down here. But if you're really, really early on, I think you'll find her value is much higher. Zahhak is an interesting pick. He is a PvP unit principally, but he does have PvE usage. You can use him in Nightmare Labyrinth. He murders the Jewleaf Council. He's got a cleanse and a CR push. He buffs. He does tremendous damage. Sure, his S3 is injury-based, and you don't injure in PvE, but the rest of his skills are so strong, and he's got a 10 soul burn on his S1 for extra damage. It makes him really good at clearing a lot of content. Only negative is he is a little bit fragile, so you'll have to take him with some support. Ice Choux used to be one of the best PvP units, and she has fallen off, and it's crazy that the RTA world has gotten so dangerously toxic that we consider rat gaming not to be that good anymore. But early in RTA, you can slam this unit and just win fights on luck alone. You'll also find some really good uses for her in Guild Wars and in some PvE, like Nightmare Raid once again. People are going to disagree with me, and I don't care. Haste is one of the best units in the game to have early game. Now, when you're in that 9 to 10 month mark where you're maybe getting ready to move on with life, you're maybe ready to dive into RTA, you're starting to think about units like Nahkwol and Ran, sure. Haste moves all the way down here beside Tenebria and Luluca, right? But early on, this guy defense breaks, he does tremendous damage, he heals your team like a healer, he puts a debuff on that lets your team heal himself. He will let you clear a lot of early game content. I'm going to slide him down here beside Bellona because, like Bellona, once you hit, I would say, mid to mid-late game, he falls off of the charts. But early on, he will let you get through a lot. Vildred is the only AoE 12-speed imprint. Now, you'll have to get more of them to get that imprint, but you'll get slates, you'll get other Vildreds. It's always good to start your Vildred. He is also really good for clearing early content. This is an investment hero. The more of them you get, the better he is for you. So at early game, you're mostly going to use this guy as a DPS unit to clear content, and at end game, you're mostly going to use this guy as an imprint to make your speeds go faster once you get multiple Vildreds. Ida is a really solid DPS unit in a world where we even have free units that do non-attack skills. She can push up, soul burn, and wipe out entire enemy teams. She's the keys to the city for early Guild Wars and some early RTA. I think this is a really good unit. She is overlooked by everybody. Lua takes really good gear, but once you have that really good gear, you'll be able to dominate in early RTA. I think she is a worthwhile pickup for people at all levels of play. If you're really early game, you'll probably pick her up and put her in your box for now, but she is worth having. Flan, especially if you pick up the current banner unit Frida, you can use Flan to crush Guild Wars, to crush Arena, and even seeing some use in RTA. Especially with units like Ludwig and BBK, Flan is a really nice pickup for any level of play that wants to play super aggressively and fast. And then we got the twins, Peira and Ran. Peira and Ran are powerhouse RTA units. Peira, I think, is a little bit better than Ran. The biggest difference is Ran will defense break you and Peira will buff block you. So this is a little bit more aggressive. This is a little bit more supportive. With the number of people that put buffs up, I think Peira is a little bit better of a pick if you're going into RTA. If you're going into the competitive side, I think Ran is a little bit of a better pickup if you're just sticking with PvE. If you're really early game and you're just looking for this guy to be a DPS and defense breaker, he is a strong unit. So this is my tier list. From left to right, from top to bottom. If you have a selector and you don't have one of these top units, get one of these top units. I don't think there's anybody who could disagree that these units are not critically powerful for your account. Slide Ravi down to here if your brand's spanking new. Slide Ravi up to here if you're considering climbing into RTA. Down here, these are either investment heroes or they're units who are going to solve problems later in the game. If you've got all the top units, I think any of these units are decent pickups and good to have on your team for use in some aspect of Epic 7. And down here, though Alencia might slide up here depending on how her buffs go, I cannot in good conscience recommend any of these units for a selector. If you have all these units and all of these units, you probably don't need a tier list. You've probably been around long enough to know what you're doing, and you can handpick the units you want based on your needs in the game. And remember, from Brieg through Bomb Model Kana, these units are all free in the game if you put the stamina and farming and in-game resources into getting them. So I hope this tier list helps you guys out. If you have any questions, please hit me up in the comments section or join my Discord, also linked in the description. Send me a DM directly. If you're on the fence about something, I'm happy to give you a little bit of advice, but everybody's got to find their own way in this game. Don't forget to like and subscribe, everybody, and have a great rest of your week. Take care, Epic 7.